We are inundated, at least I am on my emails, with information about the imminent destruction of our electric grid by the EMF. Do you have accurate information on that that can alleviate our fears, or at least give us information that's correct?
You were talking about the EMP, the electronic magnetic pulse weapon that is used to take out the electrical circuits and the electric capabilities of grids and power systems and stuff. That's a possibility. I haven't seen the potential of that happening. I would say if it does happen, it's going to be done by our own government. It's going to be a false flag attack, because Korea doesn't have it and it doesn't want to do it. Korea is not an enemy. It's not looking to invade Hawaii, and it's not going to do anything to Australia. It's the only reason they've been pursuing nuclear weapons is so that they don't suffer the same fate as Libya, as Ukraine, as Iraq, and as Syria. So they've risen up to say we're developing nuclear weapons to prevent another regime change, and China doesn't want that, because Korea, if it fell apart, you'd have millions upon millions of people flooding in China, and the Asians are very discriminatory in a sense. The Chinese are Chinese, the Koreans are Koreans, the Japanese are Japanese, and you don't mix them up. You know, the Vietnamese and the Filipinos, they're all different, and they pride themselves on that. So that's why China has been very militant to say, you know, in very polite terms, you will not go in and do a regime change in Korea. And Russia has said that too. Now, Vladimir Putin had said to some friends of mine who were in Cargolux, a European cargo carrier, Vladimir Putin had come over years ago, and he said, Russia is not the enemy. We're not the trouble. China is. And these were all European businessmen. But it was refreshing, because here's Vladimir Putin saying, you know, we're all on the same side. China is who we need to be aware of. And I hope that spreads, because one of the things that we see in America, we're suffering it, and you see it on Hannity and all the other Fox News, so you really have to sift a lot of their stuff to get a lot of their junk out. But they've been pushing this Russian lies and Russia this and Russia that, as if they were communists. And there are no more communists, essentially. There is no more Soviet Union. It's Russia. Russia are Russian Orthodox Christian people. They're very good people. It's a very good country, and I think they're the closest ally that American Christians could ever have. And I hope and pray we start really waking up and having a lot more of that awareness, because Russia has the integrity of the Christian identity. I mean, they're paying their own people to get married and have kids. We don't have that. We're trying to import them, right? That shouldn't be. People in this country, if they want to get married and have 5, 10, 20 kids, that should be their business. We should certainly be encouraging it with tax breaks, because otherwise we're in a bad way. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, quick comment before my question. Most of the communists are teaching college, and the others are in Washington.
I agree.
Okay. My question to you is, do you have any current information about the status of all these thousands of sealed indictments?
I don't have any inside knowledge about same as you, if people have watched a lot of reports on YouTube and stuff. I don't have any secret. I know what I know, and I know Hillary Clinton and Eric Holder and Lanny Breuer and Loretta Lynch. Loretta Lynch is probably the first one who's going to go down because of her tarmac meeting with Bill Clinton. And the other thing about Loretta Lynch is she gave a 2% fine to Union Bank of Switzerland for hundreds of millions of dollars that they were funneling in terrorist financing. So Loretta Lynch and Eric Holder and Lanny Breuer worked for the law firm that represented this, and then they went back to them afterwards. She'll be nailed, I think, on just the simplest. And the other thing with Comey and Strzok, Peter Strzok, they're bending over backwards like gymnasts to try and have this language so that it's not in violation of the statute and the crime for what she did with her emails. That's another thing that'll haunt them. To have a top secret clearance, and let me say, I held top secret clearance. I was a Defense Department courier, so I transported documents. I was armed all the time. They're double wrapped. You go through all sorts of training procedures. You do not need intent to violate the law when you're handling classified information. I know there's a lot of veterans here, and you all know that. When you handle classified material and you accidentally leave it on a bus, you're still going to jail for 5 to 10 years. And any idiot who tries to say she didn't have attention is just a liar. But we're living in a time full of liars, and that should outrage you. The other thing I wanted to say is, be comfortable. God says, be angry, but sin not. It's okay to be angry at these things. It's okay to be angry at the people, because you're not hating the flesh and blood. You're wrestling against powers, dark powers, and principalities. Be comfortable in your anger. Use that to sort of drop the hammer, because you've got a lot of amoral, sort of wishy-washy, people middle of the road who are more impediments. Well, everybody's this and that, and there's no real strong leadership. You all in this room, again, represent the best of this country, because you're not afraid to say what you believe. Anybody with the guts to wear a Tea Party lapel is pretty brave. It's pretty bold. There's not many people that'll do it, because they're afraid. Their treasure is in this world. Their treasure is their reputation. Their treasure is their polite sandwich teacup parties with their friends at church or whatever. You don't have that. You've got the salt, you've got the grit, and I'm honored. And anybody with Shooter's Paradise as being one of your backers, I mean, you're the best thing that these kids need to learn how to be a shooter. Learn that martial art, that discipline, that character. But be aware of anger at all this stuff. Anger at this pedophilia. That's not something to tolerate. That's something to be disgusted and angry and furious about, and make sure that nothing like this is being taught to your kids in your high schools or your junior high schools. So you walk down there and be bold. This is a time to be bold. Not reckless, not dangerous, not crazy, not anything that they can slap a charge on for you for, but go down with the team of people. Feather Party, Tea Party patriots, go down to your high schools, to the junior highs, and say, what's being taught to our kids? I want to make sure there's none of this propaganda about transgender this or gay marriage that being taught to my kids. Put them on notice. Watch them back down. Watch them fall backwards. And it's not your fight. You're just proclaiming the truth. And you love the truth. You defend the truth. Very few people do. Any questions? More? Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll come over here next here.
Hi. I'm Russ Wyluda from Placer County. You mentioned about bringing into this country only the brightest and best from other countries who want to have their people emigrate, other people want to immigrate into us. But it fails, not that you failed, but we don't mention something that is incredibly, incredibly important, and you might want to say something about it. And that is that our school systems are being intentionally dumbed down, so that our kids, so while you say, yes, let's bring their brightest and best, the problem is that we're not developing any brightest and best anymore. And we have a severe, severe problem in that. If you just took China as an example, or India as an example, you could say, gee, there are more people in the top 10% of their graduating class than there are students entirely in this country. So, who once had the maybe best educational system in the world, are now ranked 28th. Our kids, and then California, which was once #1 in the country in public school education, has graduated down to 39th. That's the best estimate. The bad ones are down around 50 out of 50. So, I wonder if you could comment on what we could or should do, and want you to think about the ideas of how do we do something to help make our school systems better, because if you listen to the stuff that the teachers are swilling out to our kids and grandchildren, now us grandchildren, you just shake your head and go, oh my God, our kids will never be able to make it. And the ones who will take the jobs that they could have had will be coming in as the brightest and best from other nations.
I agree with you. I'd say the only kids who should be in schools in America are children of American citizens, or if you're here legally, naturalized citizen, or a natural. You should not have illegal alien children in any public school. It just shouldn't happen. You open the doors to trouble, and that's how you ruin the country. So that's what we've done. That's what we've had, and I still can't understand how it's tolerated. But no illegal immigrant kid should be in a public school that's paid for by your taxes. You're paying for those schools for your children and your grandchildren, period. No one else. So, that needs to be a policy. That should be done. Let them battle it in the Supreme Court. Let them say that that's a violation of constitutional rights. You don't have constitutional rights until you are an American citizen in this country. So no one has constitutional rights. The other thing is, that's the power of organization, because you can go down to your local schools and do a check and say, I want to know every single teacher, who are the good ones and who are the funny ones. Oh, and you're teaching what? Finkelstein? Oh, you're teaching what? The tolerance, gay, gender, transgender, whatever? No. And you out them. You say, not in a slanderous or libelous way, but you say, I got a report. I went down to this school and I called out these teachers for these things, and here are their names. And you get publicity. You get it said. I think that's a way where because these people like to work in darkness, right? They like to hide in all of this evil. So you have to expose them. And you expose them from just going down and exposing their names and stuff. But you're right, it's a sad thing. We've sent our education away from reading, writing, arithmetic, and history to get in touch with your feelings and all of this nonsense. And we've created a population of schizophrenics. Schizophrenic kids. I shudder when I think, can this country even last with such a generation? Can we even last with these Antifa punk kids dressed in black? You don't have the character to show their face. They hide behind bandanas, and they throw stuff through the colleges and protest conservative speakers. That's 1933 fascism. We can't survive as a free society, but you have to educate your own kids, your own grandkids, your own nieces and nephews.
They condemn you if you speak out against Antifa, because they say, you should have spoke out against the fascists. I speak out against both of them, the fascists and the communists.
And you become a school board member.
Yeah, there you go.
Involved and change the system from within.
Yeah, that's a great one. Become a board member. Yes, ma'am.
This is recent history. It's not about children right at the moment, but something was mentioned
this was mentioned by the gentleman who introduced you, and we needed a little input from you as to something about an engine hitting on the airplanes that went into our...
Oh yeah. Well, 9/11 is I didn't discover it till I was in the prison, and I was surrounded by guys who did the work and the details, and it was fascinating. It was like the scene in Pleasantville, if you saw that movie, where it's a story about everybody lives in black and white, and then suddenly they turn to color. And when I discovered the whole 9/11 and all of it, it was like turning into color. When you really do the math and the science and the analysis, and you're surrounded by people, Jim Fetzer, Kevin Barrett, Barbara Honegger, Susan Lindauer, all of these people that have a perspective on this story, and Richard Gage, architects and engineers, and you start doing the math and you start really laying out the proof, you see the physical scientific impossibility of the government narrative. What the government says happens is physically impossible on all sorts of levels. My dad was a pilot. It's impossible for a big plane to come that fast at that low altitude and crash in because the plane breaks up. Because big planes are meant to go fast at high altitudes because it's thin air. There's no real resistance. Lower altitudes, there's a lot more moisture in the air. So the air is thicker. So the planes can't go that fast or else the wings break off. They proved that in simulations. So aerodynamics. The planes are made of aluminum for the most part. So if you say that there was a plane, the aluminum plane crashing into a steel concrete building would be like taking an empty can and crushing it against a wall, because the wall is superior to the plane. The plane is weaker, it's thinner, it's made of aluminum. And when you look at the video, the plane just kind of disappears. And Jim Fetzer said there was no plane. That was a holographic image, or they painted it in, but there was no plane because, as Mike said, there was no plane parts found at the scene. The engine they found, and a lot of this is, you see some of it if you dig, but the engine they found was from a 747, I think it was, that was on a gurney, it was on a dolly that had just been unloaded from a van. So they tried to make it look like a plane engine. So the plane engine was the thing that they, okay, here we go. The plane engine they found was from a different plane. The other thing was Building 7. Building 7, the Solomon building, free fall, speed fall from internal detonation. I drove by the Pentagon the next day because I worked in, I was doing my doctorate, and I drove by the Pentagon every day on George Washington Parkway. The next day after September 11th, the roads were empty. But I was on George Washington Parkway, and just as I was passing the Pentagon, I looked up to my right, and there was a big blue tarp over this part of the Pentagon. No plane wreckage on the ground, no burned grass, no yellow tape, just a big blue tarp, like the size of one of these doors. If a big plane, 767, had hit, it would be all over the place. There wasn't anything. And those engines on those planes under the wings would have had big holes in the side of the Pentagon. There was nothing there. Barbara Honegger did a good presentation. We did an interview with her called Behind the Smoke Curtain. And she analyzes everything about the Pentagon attack and why it was a missile or a drone dressed up to look like a TWA flight. They only found like a small piece of metal. So there was no big plane that hit the Pentagon. I know that for a fact because I drove by the next day. And you wonder, why you didn't pick this up at the time. And I think it's just information overload, the whole psyop on the American public. But the hope is now that when you wake up to it, it's a pretty big chunk of wisdom to carry. But we have a duty to share it. We have a duty to respectfully and scientifically present the physical evidence. And there's some wonderful research that's been done out there that looks at look at the Twin Towers. If you look at architects and engineers, they have a yearly film festival too that comes out in Oakland. I'd encourage you to go to, called the 9/11 Film Fest or something, and they gather all these films, and they always address 9/11, and they talk about the Twin Towers falling into a heap of dust. That towers, when they crumble, right, they would pancake and they'd stop. They wouldn't just fall into a big cloud of dust. And that's where Jim Fetzer says they were small nuclear devices that were used. Why was all this done? Because they wanted to open up the Middle East into this juggernaut of capitalism, democracy, wiping away the regimes, and doing a new world order sort of plan. And the Israelis had this in their Ode Danann plan. They've been planning to disintegrate the Middle East for a long time and just balkanize, break up all those kingdoms that have been around since the 1930s. And now we're sort of at the gates, and Russia and Syria and Iran have stopped it. And I hope we stop doing that, because we're very close to a war with, Russia and China, and we have some real problems there. because we're seen around the world, sadly, as a destabilizer instead of Reagan's city on a hill, as we should be. Yes, sir.
Do you have any information on the what they call the DUMBs, deep underground military bases?
I don't personally. No, I mean, I think there's been a lot of talk about that. Oh, one kind of a good segue into that. There were talk about those sort of things, deep underground stuff and mineral resources pertaining to the Hammonds and the Bundys and their land in Nevada and Oregon. There's a lot of talk of deep bases. There's a lot of talk of mineral resources being sold, purchased, and stolen and sold off. I wanted to say one thing about that. One of the things that we saw just recently that happened that should be an inspiration for everybody in this room is that Cliven Bundy was released and acquitted with prejudice because the government behaved so atrociously. The government prosecutors exercised prosecutorial misconduct. They hid evidence. They lied to the judge. The judge, I think, is a piece of garbage anyway. She was appointed by Obama. But they lied to the judge, and the judge acquitted Cliven Bundy. So that was phase one. Phase two is going to be Cliven Bundy and his sons and everyone saying, we were right all along, and we're going to continue. The Bureau of Land Management has no constitutional grounds to own any land in the country. The Constitution says, and Chris Ann Hall is a very good lawyer. She was up on Paul Preston's Liberty Tour a couple years back. Chris Ann Hall, former Army officer, JAG attorney, Christian, had said essentially what everybody knows. The Constitution says the federal government shall have no land except seaports and areas that the states give the federal government to lease. The federal government has no right to set up the Teddy Roosevelt Park or the Yellowstone Park or Yosemite Park or anything. California can, North Dakota can, but the federal government cannot. It cannot come in and seize land and call it the domain of the purple tree frog, as Obama liked to do, and throw people in jail. So I think this is going to turn in a positive direction, and Cliven Bundy and all of those men have been redeemed. And I think it's your prayers too, because I know a lot of people have been praying for the Bundys and the Hammonds. You know, God hears that. Pray without ceasing. The prayer of a righteous man availeth much. And that's the joy. I think Bundy's going to be risen up. I know Lavoy Finicum, his wife. I mean, you hear the testimony of Victoria Sharp and the Finicums being shot up in that car. It's a terrible thing. An assassination squad under Comey, incidentally. Yeah. Comey was responsible for that. So the Amand Bundy and the Cliven Bundy and the Hammonds, never forget the Hammonds were the ranchers up in Oregon who were thrown in jail as terrorists under a terrorist statute because they're farmers. They're in Oregon in this vast wasteland in a sense, and they light fires to control the bush for their cattle, and the flames ignite onto neighboring federal lands that the federal government doesn't have a right to own anyway, yet they claim to have jurisdiction and ownership, and they spark a fire on federal lands, and the federal government comes in and tries to charge the Bundys. Originally they charged them, and the local judge threw it out. The federal government then came in and tried them and got them guilty, but only got like 6 months or even probation. And the federal government appealed that and said because it was a terrorist statute. This is where the Patriot Act comes in. This is where all of this stuff people thought, well, if you got nothing to hide, don't worry. Well, it'll never affect you. Want to bet if it can affect a mom and pop rancher in Oregon and call them terrorists and throw them in jail for 5 years, it can affect everybody in this room. If I fill out a housing form between me and a commander and Obama comes in and doesn't like me because I don't stand for his gay transgender marriage with him and his transgender wife, Michael J. Robinson, and they throw me in jail because of a statement on a housing form, it can happen to you. So once you've been awoken to this, you never see the law quite the same. But the Hammonds were thrown in jail, and President Trump needs to pardon all of those people. He needs to pardon the Hammonds. He needs to pardon Michael Emery, who was another guy who was targeted by the FBI and thrown in jail. And you know, he had to take a plea deal because they were threatening his family. There's some horrific things, but there's a lot of hope because the Hammonds won, the Bundys won, and this momentum, I think, is going to keep spreading. And if Trump does not get on the right side and push this along, and if he tries to do a dance with these Democrats, he's a fool. He'll be a one-term president. He has to stick with his base if he has any brains. Yes, sir?
Where does James Comey fall into the place of things with HSBC and all the money you were talking about this was famous?
Well, he was tied in with HSBC. He was his brother has a law firm that did the accounting, I think, for HSBC. So Comey is tied to the hip of HSBC. HSBC is a terrorist bank, a financing bank bad guys use. It was also identified by Senator, what's his name? Who's the old Jewish guy who looked like a cobbler with the glasses on his forehead all the time? He retired. No, not Lieberman. It'll come to me. But there was a Senate report that addressed HSBC as a major financier of terrorism. And so Comey being tied into that is just, he's a cover-up artist. I mean, these people hoped that they were going to have 16 years of criminal action, that they could then hide this, you know, the tracks in the snow. And that's not the reality. Trump stopped all that. So luckily, we've got materials that we can say, here are the tracks, right here. Here are the bank accounts. Here is the timeline that they did this. Hillary Clinton, and this is the irony of it, Birkenfeld had WikiLeaks cables sent into him, and I've got them here. And I've also got the letter from Bill Nelson, and he was dumb enough to put this on his website, and we printed it off, and this will hang him. This will get Bill Nelson hung for treason, if not shot, and I'd be the happy guy to pull the trigger. Bill Nelson of Florida sent on June 20th, 2013, to Senator Dianne Feinstein, Senate Select Committee. Dear Chairman Feinstein, it's recently been brought to my attention that the unauthorized disclosure of classified information on Edward Snowden was not the only disturbing evidence incident involving Booz Allen Hamilton. Blah, blah, blah. Now I'm filming, let's see, where did you see me? I was reminded of another situation of a Booz Allen Hamilton employee. Scott Bennett, hired to work as counter-threat finance analyst at McDill. Blah, blah, blah. So what he acknowledges to Senator Feinstein of the Intelligence Committee is Scott Bennett in his report Shell Game, but he doesn't go into what that report disclosed, which was terrorist financing being used by Swiss banks, HSBC, UBS, being sent to him and other members. So I think when all of this goes into a court of law, like Trey Gowdy and others are going to do, you're going to see a lot of people get sued, go to jail, and possibly worse.
What's the best way to reach President Trump?
Well, you can call his press office. You know, you can call the White House. They usually won't send you through, but you know, you can leave a message. The address, of course, to the White House is 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Northwest, Washington, D.C., 20500. So you can send them a letter. You can send a registered letter, so you get the certified mail thing back, hopefully. You can also email. But I think Trump is an anomaly of very interesting proportions, because he tweets a lot, and his comment alone, I mean, it's a stroke of genius to say, why are we letting so many people from shithole countries come into this country? Everybody woke up, and the good people said, yeah, why are we doing that? I side with him. All the pieces of garbage are saying, oh, well, we should let all these, yeah, we should let everybody who wants to come. That's a sign of a maniac who's dying.
Closure.
Who else?
Closure over there.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you really think that any of these people are going to go to jail? They're so covered up.
They will if I have anything to do with it. I mean, I'll testify, and I look forward to it, and I keep saying it. And I said it in the letter we sent to Trump. I said, be advised, be advised you are hereby served notice that I am requesting an official subpoena to testify regarding terrorist financing, UBS, Booz Allen Hamilton. This report was submitted by an officer in 2012. on September 25th, 2012, from an officer of the United States Army who held a top secret clearance and worked in terrorist financing and worked at the State Department and worked at BOOZ and Hamilton. If there's someone better than me that can talk about it, please bring him on. But that's a fact, Mr. President. What are you going to do about it? And because I don't dance and I don't back down and I don't retreat, and I know where my place is, to be absent from the bodies, to be present with the Lord. Come quickly.
Well, are you worried about your life?
Not at all, because I know who holds my life.
But you haven't heard from him, have you?
Well, I don't go into open source talks about what we've done and what we've said, just to keep it secret, keep the bad guys on their toes. But be assured, it's never going to disappear. And we will continue the battering ram, and the door will fall, and the castle will fall. And the hope is that Trump is going to be raising our flag, the American flag, and throwing out all these parasites that we've had for 30, 40 years. We've got a political class that just really needs to be pushed out and new people brought in. And again, you know, you represent the Tea Party. You represent people that are unapologetic, are bold, are fearless. I mean, anybody can be a Republican. Anybody can be a Democrat. Very few people can be Tea Party people, because that means you stand up and say, I'm a Tea Party guy. That means revolution is good, independence is good, and I'm not retreating. I'm standing for my country. Who's with me? That's a bold warrior, and that's what I'd say you all are. Mike.
Okay, what should we do about Mr. Trump allowing all these dual citizen Israeli Zionists to run the show and make Israel greater than America? What should we do about that stuff?
Well, there's a major problem in the whole Christian Zionism theory that political Israel somehow is wrapped up into the apocalyptic end time scenario and Magog and Gog and Armageddon and all that stuff. And I followed John Hagee and I followed all those guys and I know about them. And I think to myself, you know, we have to be very careful, because people who go in and try and make American foreign policy based upon the timetable of whatever their interpretations are of the book of Revelation and Daniel and all that are playing a very dangerous game, because they're pushing America into being fanatically, I think, pro-Israel to a level that is costing us a lot more than we're gaining. And to, you know, do things like move the embassy to Jerusalem. I think you've opened up a Pandora's box, and you really, it's going down a route that we don't need to go down. I remember Susan Lindauer and the other congresswoman, what was her name? The black congresswoman, what's her name? Do you remember? She had said an incredible tale about when
she had to sign a waiver making.
Yeah, when she had told a story when all people go into Congress, they're approached by the Israeli lobby to sign a waiver or sign an agreement that recognizes and chooses to serve Israeli national interests, and she wouldn't sign it. So there's a lot of problems there that I think, you know, again, new people need to be running for Congress and just get new blood. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, one quick question. You know, you were saying that they weren't really airplanes.
Yeah.
What happened about the people that were on board?
That's a good question. We've had a guy Perloff on our show a few times, and he said the planes could have went to a very high altitude, cut off the oxygen, and people on board would have been killed. And then they fly the plane back to low altitude and could have flown them to areas off India or areas off Israel. So there's that theory that they were, you know, just cut off the oxygen. So the only place that has oxygen is the cabin.
Yeah, but some of these conversations took place just minutes before the impact.
Well, there's a lot of speculation of did they actually happen in the planes? Were they recorded somewhere else? I'll defer to Fetzer and some of the other people that are a little bit more expert on the breakdown of the exact timing, because it can get pretty confusing. But I think if you stick to the broad strokes and say there was no plane at the Pentagon, period. So anybody who says there was a plane there is a liar, and something else happened. And you don't need to find out exactly in the details. You just need to know something else happened. and Building 7 imploded, was taken down by detonation. And then the Twin Tower buildings turned into dust and rubble. They should have pancaked if anything. Plus, they should never even gone down. If a plane hit the building at the top third, it may have crumpled the top third, but everything below it is healthy building. It's a healthy, strong building. Never in the history of buildings has anything happened. So, again, the scientific explanation by the government is scientifically impossible. And that's all we need to stand on. It doesn't get emotional, it doesn't get racial, it doesn't get religious, it doesn't get anything other than science, gravity, concrete, and steel versus aluminum. And why were Judy Wood had some good things too. Why is there missing porcelain from the bathrooms and the steel tip of the fireman boots are turned to crumble? Why are there some weird anomalies? Is it energy-directed weapons? A lady was asking me, do you think these energy-directed weapons started the fires? And I think you've got a strong case to say maybe they were. How else could a car being on a driveway have melted tires? You know, the metal, the rims. How in the heck can you melt rims into a pool of mercury-looking metal? Unless it's with something superior, not just, you know, a forest fire. So there's some weird things going on. And then the chemtrails. That's another thing. Again, that's where new political leadership needs to rise up and address these issues, because we've got some serious problems in our country and our environment, and we can't survive long if we keep it going. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What's the number of the district you're running in?
The 12th district, Marc Desaulniers. We went to Marc Desaulniers in his office and presented all of this. We also presented it to his staff, and they were turning pale and falling all over themselves. So we're going in to say, this guy can't be congressman because he's guilty of misprision of a felony. He's guilty of treason. We gave him this material on August 1st, 2016. I went into his office, I videotaped it, it's on YouTube, and we said, here it is right here, terrorist financing, Swiss banks, Hillary Clinton, the Clinton Foundation, soldiers are dead because of it. You're being given it, do something, send me a subpoena, we want to testify. And Marc Desaulniers' staff, turning pale, said, we'll get back to you. Never did. So they'll hang because of it. Evidence doesn't go away. Always speak, and I said this to one of our friends, always speak as if you're in a court of law. Always, and never talk to a police officer, never talk to anybody from the government. If somebody knocks on your door and says, I'd like to ask you some questions, I'm with the police or with the FBI or with the government, I make no statements other than when my attorney is present. So I assert my constitutional rights, I have nothing to say, and if you have any questions for me, send it to my attorney. But that's the only way that you will be safe. Had Michael Flynn done that, he wouldn't have been charged with making a false statement. Oh, and incidentally, Michael Flynn, guess who his attorney is? Covington and Burling. So Michael Flynn, and I said this to Trump people too, and I said, Michael Flynn, and I know Paul has a theory on this, and I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag, but Michael Flynn was approached by Covington and Burling to represent him. And Covington and Burling represented Union Bank of Switzerland and Saudi Arabia and all these bad guys in terrorist financing. So the same law firm that's a party to this cannot represent Michael Flynn. So Michael Flynn can file a motion for newly discovered evidence, fraud on the court, same thing we heard with Clive and Bundy, fraud on the court, prosecutorial misconduct, and Michael Flynn could throw out his guilty plea and use that to expose a lot of this. And that may be part of his deep state operation. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. I don't mind answering, I just don't want to dominate Paul Preston or anybody else at time that's going on. Go ahead.
Okay, all these fires, must be really horrible.
The fires, yes.
Yeah, and then we heard that they were caused by laser beams.
Yeah.
That were activated by what the chemtrails were putting into the air.
Yeah. Well, the chemtrails, Michael J. and others are a little bit more experienced with the knowledge of that. Chemtrails are being sprayed in the atmosphere as aluminum to deflect radiation and sunlight rays, and what they've done to a large degree is caused the drought that we have in California. That's one of the counter-arguments of the detrimental effect of chemtrails. So the chemtrails that they're spraying, and you can see in the sky, they're not the trails of smoke behind big planes. They're actual aluminum sulfide or something. But that hasn't been brought out and really prosecuted and investigated. It should be, but you know, that's another issue to address to people who are in your political parties. These are real existing things that deserve real answers from people in political positions. Yes, ma'am. Okay. I've got a limited number of books back there, but if you want one, just sign your name and your address and your phone number and your email, and I'll have one ordered from the publisher and sent to your address. Yeah, you can leave your $20 here or write a check, and then I'll order them from the publisher, and you should get them in like a week and a half, 2 weeks. So just put your name on the sheet. For if you want the book, it's Shell Game, and it's $20 on the publisher. It's like $25, but I'll get the publisher to knock it, and it'll come to you by the mail, so you can just fill it out back there. And again, this is an experience that can be very useful if you are running for political office, or you have anybody that you're going to go to a town hall meeting or something. You hold this up and you say, Senator, Congressman, I've got a report here from a military officer who did terrorist financing for a living. And this report he sent up that describes Hillary Clinton, the Clinton Foundation, and various people in the government doing terrorist financing. Crimes have been committed. Kids are dead because of it. What are you going to do about it? What are you committing to us to do about it? And are you going to investigate, and are you going to prosecute people about this? And see if they stumble and give you a crap answer, or if they give you a man's answer, a hero's answer, a Tea Party patriot's answer. Says, no, I'm going to investigate it, I'm going to hunt them down, and I'm going to bring to justice everybody who's been part of this. Because I know we will. Yes, sir?
How is your support in Danville from the local people?
You know, Danville is, it's not the old country town that it used to be. It used to be, in a lot of ways, Yuba City. It's become a lot more yuppie. So I've lived there for 20, 30 years before I went out to Washington and then came back. I went to high school and all that there. But there are some old-fashioned country cowboy types in Danville. So California, it has a lot of pockets of conservatives, a lot of pockets of good old folks. And we have not surrendered, and that's why, Paul Preston is a genius when it comes to the political mitosis of California into a new state. I can't imagine anybody better that I would trust with the political leadership and the articulation of language to explain the evolution of California into a new state than Paul Preston. Because California needs to separate so that we can start from scratch and really live by the old school California Constitution that is spread away and divorced from all of this new stuff that they put in for the last 50 years that have been killing our state. So the best hope is a political mitosis, a separate new state, and in that new state, you can start from scratch and you can go right to everybody has the right to keep and bear arms. Crime will go to nothing, and you raise your kids the way you want to raise them and have the school system teach what you want them to teach. And the new state can say the federal government shall not come into our new state and set up Bureau of Land Management operations or FBI operations or any of these federal government operations without the express permission of you, the people. And that's where we need to get back to. And again, the only people that have the testicular fortitude to do that are Tea Party patriots, because that's in your DNA. That's what you are. You're a warrior class. So don't join the followers. Any other questions? Jerry Brown? Terrible psychopath. I think he could be hung from a rope too. Marty was just sharing with me all of the the economic promises that he made and the liabilities, the state liabilities next year that we're not going to be able to pay for. So, I mean, Jerry Brown promised the police and all these people full salary after you retire, and all that is just crazy nonsense, and now we're having to pay the piper. So again, we need a new state to separate from all that stuff and get back to the deputization. I was at Williams, you know, when we first started this new state thing, and Williams had this old building where you had everything from the 1800s, and I found an old law, a set of legal law books, and it had the old 1850 California Constitution. And when you get back to the California Constitution of 1850, you see that none of the stuff that we're living under now applied back then. You had deputization, you had, you know, the townsfolk really owning and controlling everything in their society. Law enforcement, common law. I mean, it's very refreshing. So we need to get back to that. And I think we will.